And we're broadcasting. And if you could mute yourself while you're not talking, that'd be great. Hello, everybody.
Welcome to Digital 360 Summit 2020. We are the premier event for senior executives driving industry digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization. 2020 edition is a free virtual event via Zoom. The dates are August 18th, 19th, and 20th, 2020, and August 25th, 26th, 27th, 2020. We want to thank our sponsors, Texas State University, Greater San Marcos Partnership, and Cedar. This year's edition has 70 speakers from amazing companies like NASA, Intel, SAP, CPS Energy, Brazos River Authority, Gaterra, Direct Energy, City of Austin, Aclara, Dell, Engie, Exelon, Oracle, Testra, General Motors, TX DOT, Vistra, Siemens, AT&T, National Grid, Itron, City of Los Angeles, Austin Energy, City of Colorado Springs, and Hunt Energy Network, and over 1,000 attendees. The program has 16 keynotes and 11 panels, followed by 11 white papers and 28 videos. The event covers multiple industry verticals like networks, energy and utilities, buildings and infrastructure, water and wastewater, public safety and new financial tools, smart cities, sensor and edge computing, big data and software, smart mobility, new regulations and business models, space and smart factory, and Industry 4.0. We are also introducing Texas State Cedar, a new industry research consortium focused on connected infrastructure research enabling big ideas and the topics covered in each of the panels. We at Texas State, Star Park, Cedar, the Greater San Marcos Partnership, and industry partners are focusing on building 9 living labs to transform applied research and economic development with the goal to delivering one digital world.
All right, welcome everybody to day 4 of the Digital 360 Summit 2020. We have a packed day for you. We have right now the Smart Cities keynote and panel. And as we saw in the video real quick, an introduction to Cedar. And before we get rolling here with Dr. Butler, I want to share the Cedar video and make sure that you guys really catch up a little bit on what we're trying to do there. And if there's some questions or emails needed some answers after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Hopefully you can see my screen, and let me make that bigger. And here we go with the Cedar video. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much. And here we go. Let me introduce you to Dr. John Butler. John, how are you?
I'm just fine. It's good to be here. A great day.
Excellent. Before I get there real quick, let me say hello to Llewellyn. Hi, Llewellyn.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Let me say hi to Helen.
Hello, good to be
How are
here.
you, Helen? Hi, let me say hi to David. Hey, David.
Fun. Very glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. Let me say hello to Dennis.
Hey, Andre, how are you? Good to see you and good to see everybody. It's good to be here.
Good to see you. Let me say hello to Rebecca, Dr. Davio.
Hello, thank you very much for the invite to be here. Good to see everybody.
Excellent. Let me say hello to Ryan.
Hi, good afternoon. Likewise, very happy to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. And let me say hello to Arun Vedhathiri. Hi, Arun.
Thank you all for inviting me to the panel. Excited to be here and share our experiences from National Grid Utility perspective.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Dr. John Butler, and John, feel free to take over the screen and do your thing as I'll introduce you. Dr. John Butler is a professor at the School of McComb's business at the University of Texas, Austin. He's an IC Square Endowed Fellow. He's the J. Marion West Chair in Constructive Capitalism and also the director of the John Bromley Texas Venture Labs. Welcome, John. Thank you for keynoting for us. Delighted to have you here. Take it away.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here to think about things as things change. And the name of my topic is Social Physics and Smart Cities and Business Models. That is, we know that things are constantly changing. In this era of where we are now, what we know, though, is that it is very, very interesting to see how cities change. So what we're going to do very, very briefly here is to go through, do I have my slides, Andre?
Yes, go ahead and use the keyboard. Click on the keyboard down.
Yeah, I'm doing that. I'm going to use my slides to go through, if you will, the slides, and I'll just talk about them as I get it to work here. Okay, things are constantly changing. And I have a slide here, and I ask the panelists and everybody, can you spot the buggy and horse in this picture? I think there's one. Now, can you spot any horses in this picture? What we're doing here is thinking about the whole idea of disruption and change. We usually think about disruption and change in terms of automobiles. So I can ask you right here, can you spot the battery in this car? Or can you spot the battery in this car, which might be all battery? So what we have here with cities is constant change, but what we don't have here with smart cities is the idea of creating great business models around that change. So I want to talk some about the idea of social physics and just simply putting the equations to the ideas that we have, to the big data that we have, so that we can write equations about the movement of people, and more importantly for our discussion here, write equations that will reflect great models for what we call smart cities. So what we know is that in this time of connectivity, that in terms of the idea of the hardware, or what we call the Internet of Things, certainly is moving very, very fast. We know we're going to have smart cities, we're going to have smart telephones, we're going to have smart buggies, we're going to have smart automobiles. We're going to have all things that are smart, and the reason they're smart is very, very simple. They really, really exude data. They have an idea that no matter what the change is, as we move from factory to that wiped out the blacksmith, the horse and buggy, from the automobile, we go from creative destruction. All of these things made data very, very different. Even if you look at how the factory wiped out the automobile and automation, we received a lot of data. Really received a lot of data, and we really improved on how people really, really thought about things, how they moved around the workplace, and et cetera. We are in a very, very interesting time right now for the smart city. That is, how can we create new business models in the smart city in terms of also the electric utility industry? And my conception is that this industry and the Internet of Things will have so much data that it can replace most of the things that they're doing now, and these business models will be actually dynamic. So very quickly, and let's do a little academic stuff here. You know, what we're talking about here is the whole idea of the flow and space of people. Space is just crystallized time for practices which flow through the space of flows. Now, in everyday language, to get out of the academic ring, this is a cell phone, okay? This is your dishwasher. This is everything, the Internet of Things that have brought us together. So all of the bits and pieces, when we get online, when we get online and do our business, when we do all of these things, the connectivity is there. And so all of these things are moving through space, but it's crystallized time for those practices. So in everyday language, it goes like this. You know, there's a lot going on with the cell phone, but there's a lot of data. We're connected. There's a lot going on with the automobile, but we are connected in the sense that my automobile tells me when it needs to go to the shop. There's a lot going on with the house, but perhaps you're connected. So we've got all of this data that's running through time. And so time then really becomes our major variable, because all of a sudden we can do everything on real time. And the space of flows is the material foundations of our time. So we're going to take time as a variable to say that we can't erase time, but we have compressed time to produce so many different business models. Now, when we talk about the Internet of Things and the flow of time and et cetera, we all know it well. We know what goes through the space of flows. We have the corporate internet. We have the cloud. We have other elite networks of information. We have the space of flows. It is boundless. You are either in or you're out. You're either switched off or you're switched on. And of course, in our time, in this social physics of the space of flows, where everything is connected, we can do it, we're doing everything in real time. The question becomes, what are the business models? How can we continue to examine what's really going on? And of course, we talk about the 5G and the space of flows and the ecosystem of systems. So remember, everything that we do in terms of technology should have a relationship between how we live, whether it's relaxing, whether it's goofing off, or whether it is indeed making a living. So what we need to do is connect all of these things to all of the technologies that's going on, and then just ask a basic question. What is going on in terms of the relationship between the space of flows, if you will, social physics, if you will, and new business models? So I pull up some data to say that the size of China's AI software and application market is expected to reach 12.75 billion by 2024. That is from the International Data Corporation. So we have here pictured a smart automobile, a smart bus that's not only taking people around, but producing data and collecting data from individuals so it knows when to collect people to take them around. We have the whole idea that we know exactly where John Butler would like to buy stuff because we do stuff in patterns. All of the 5G data, as we talk about in our digital roundtable with Andre Cavalis, all of this 5D stuff is very interesting when you look at the activities of what companies are doing. So let's just pause for a minute here and ask, what is this data stuff? I mean, what can cities be doing? As I'll say later in the presentation, can we replace the whole idea of swimming pools with data-driven kinds of enterprises? Because given 5G, given the electric utilities, given what they know about smart houses, and given that everything is driven by electricity, then there'll be so much data to sell. There'll be so much data to allow people to understand how to create new business models. Whether or not it's me jumping on an Uber to go to a football game, and the data would tell them where and when I would be after the game. So all of this is being really generated by the social physics, the space of flows, how information is flowing. What's different is it can be done in a real-time fashion, okay? Let's go back here to Andres Cavalis' Digital Roundtable and Data are the New Oil. We have discussed this on a national base, and the question becomes this. If petroleum then was the major industry in the last century, perhaps data themselves are the major industry now. And this is simply to design and to argue the following. There are so many different kinds of business models that can come from the data, okay? Now, Andres, in our daily and our weekly kinds of activity, actually had the mathematical model to do away with poverty. He would say that John Butler is a poor guy, but he produces a lot of data. Shouldn't John Butler be able to put his data on the open market? Now, if we extrapolate that to cities, if we extrapolate that to buildings, if we extrapolate that to all of the Internet of Things, then it is almost very, very interesting to see how much data there are. But our problem is, how do we make sense out of this business models? Now, I will just say this about this. The whole idea of what we will talk about today is the data scientist. Our job is to take all of that noise that we see, all of the data that we see, and tell the utility company the following. You have the data on how many people go to a swimming pool. You have the data on how many people go through a red light. You have so much data, why not package this data, create the models, create the equations, so that you can market the data to swimming suit firms. You can market the data to people who are concerned with the flow of traffic. You can market the data to grocery stores. You can market and create a business model and sell that data, if you will, to many, many kinds of industries, okay? So therefore, what you find then is that the data that's evolving should really enhance things like, especially I think the utility industry, that will certainly have all of the data that they would need going forward at their fingertips. As I've said, here are some of the examples that I've talked about, from appliances, from smart lights, from poles, from meters, engaging marketing firms and other organizations with data as they plan their future. And of course, to enhance or replace or renew data from swimming pools, parks, et cetera, with big data and marketing. So, you know, in closing, so that we can get to the panel here, this is from my own research, and this is simply the equations to bring the entrepreneur to Austin, Texas. This is a person who would start a company, they will move to Austin because it is a smart city. But remember, we do this based on the big data that we essentially have. So I think that the smart city going forward and the utility industry going forward would have to have an infusion of new business models. Those new business models will be created by data scientists. Those new models will be very, very interesting. And let's take some time for the panel, and I hope I have stirred your intellectual basis so that Llewellyn King can take over and guide us along some thought, information, and discussion on what I've said. Llewellyn?
Thank you very much, John Butler. Excellent presentation and really stimulating and thought-provoking, which is what we want. Welcome, panel. It's nice to have you all with us. I'm going to run through the names very quickly, but when it comes to your turn to speak, or when I ask you a question, or if it's just an interjection, do say what you do at your company, because we don't have a lot of time to read out biographies. We have, of course, John Butler, the redoubtable John Butler, who you've met, and then Arun Vedhathiri, who is with National Grid, Rebecca Davio with Texas State, Helen Ramirez, City of Brownsville, Texas, David Jacot, City of Los Angeles, Dennis Gakunga, City of Chula Vista, California, and Ryan Trujillo of Colorado Springs. Welcome all. I would like to go immediately. One question for John, and that is, where do people fit into your future? I've been interested in what is happening in some cities where they're trying to decide the human content of the future smart city. For example, in Louisville, Kentucky, there's an institute which is planting trees because they believe you get greater health, very important in a city, a longer life expectancy, and also more happiness. When I write about future cities, smart cities, I am flooded with people who say, will they be walkable? They don't ask me about data. They don't ask me about automated transportation. Will they be walkable? Where does that fit into your business plans that are going to shape the future, John?
Excellent question. I think the data make the cities walkable. That is, the data themselves are information so that people can fit in. And over the last 60 or 70 years, whether it's the automobile, we really fit in. Whether it's the telephone, we really fit in. Whether it's robotics, we really fit in. So I think that's an excellent question, because as technology has changed, People have had more opportunity to goof off. People have had to figure out where do they belong. People have had to figure out, will I get on this elevator that's going up and down by itself? People have had to figure out, am I going to get on this train that's flying around the Dallas Fort Worth airport with no kind of conductor? So I think that fitting into the technology has been what we've done. And if you look at what technology has done, it has done two things. It has provided different kinds of jobs, but more jobs. And it has provided more leisure time for individuals to walk.
Well, popping back to your excellent illustration of those early cars, they were remarkably indifferent to safety. The Ford A, for example, because they wanted gravity feed for the fuel, had the fuel tank sitting on people's laps. It was in the console. It was in the most dangerous place you could put it in terms of human safety in a crash. It took a long time to get anywhere close to the safety level we have in today's automobile. So there you had a sort of imperial move by technology to provide transportation with a remarkable indifference, if I might say so, to the human beings. How do you put that into the future city so that human concern grows in tandem with technological expansion?
Absolutely. When the airplane developed, they said when the automobile developed, they said if the human body went over 30 miles an hour, it would disintegrate. When the keyboard developed, they said we would have carpal tunnel, which we do. With cell phones, what's the probability of having brain cancer? So with all technologies come the fact that when data are fed back to us, if you will, then there certainly will be improvement. But you are absolutely right. My grandmother would not trust a system that can a microwave because she thought it was an atomic bomb and it had to be bad because it went so fast. But every movement of technology, the cell phone is the idea you might have brain cancer, the keyboard, carpal tunnel. So we always have to put up with the idea and we improve things as we go along. You're exactly right. We cannot harm the human body, but a lot of technologies have had to go through that situation.
Arun, the future city is going to be very dependent on electricity because everything is going to be hooked up and it's going to need not only electricity, but absolutely reliable electricity. And yet we haven't got that yet. Every time there's a severe storm, we lose electric supply. How are we going to ensure total resiliency so a city that's tremendously dependent on sensors hooked up to motors, running all of these automated devices, will have a permanent, reliable supply of electricity?
Thanks again. That was a fantastic question. I think reliability is becoming way more important as we go along. We've had, we constantly encounter storms. Most of our network today is overhead for economics reasons, and that creates a problem when a tree falls, right? It's fairly straightforward. It's not too complicated. Utilities are moving towards a more distributed generation model where there will be energy generation at the edge of the customer. You can think of solar panels. Electric cars is another fantastic source, got a huge battery in every car that could also be a grid resource. So electric utilities are definitely moving towards a distributed generation model, also a distributed risk model. And that risk model is sharing data between edge resources. This could be resources that are owned by customers, owned by cities, owned by utilities. That's where the business model is coming in. We are trying to figure out what's the right and who has the best position in the market to bring this to life. And so cities are playing a data engine role. There is a lot of data coming. As utilities, we are also part of that electrification process. We have a huge roadmap and investment plans for electrification of traffic, which means we're going to be putting chargers in a lot of places where you can park a car in today's locations, right? And so that really, so a walking payment is also a charging payment. We even see where there's no wire, there's an automatic magnetic charge without a wire. So a lot of interesting technologies coming in. Cities are becoming very dynamic places where people, utilities, technology, everything intersect and the lines are blurring. So it is a future. So the future is definitely a shared model And highly, this is going to work by data sharing between all the entities and trust between the entities.
Thank you, Aaron. And would you tell us what you do at National Grid? And I will mention that I'm a customer of yours. I live in Rhode Island.
Super, thank you. So I work for an innovation team. Our team is to come up with the next set of products and services, and we are very much focused on making it customer-centric because customer adoption is the key to success and scale. And so we understand technology to a great extent. We constantly are looking to make sure we bring technology that are long-lasting. One of the things utilities inevitably have is responsibility. If you put up a light fixture, we need to make sure the light fixture is talking to us for its lifetime, 10, 20 years, whatever its life is. And so it's not just the light, it's cybersecurity, it's maintenance, it's everything, and it still has to be cost effective end of the day. So we are laser focused on bringing technologies and business models that are self-sustaining by themselves. And so that is a big part of what I do, is understand where the future city is going, trying to understand the business models, and sometimes it's a shared business model between us and the city with new ways of generating revenue, and then finding ways to bring it to scale.
Thank you, Aaron. Rebecca Davio, Texas State. Rebecca, do you take an academic look at this, or are you involved in the granular side of the smart city?
Well, I'm probably much more of an applied than an academic practitioner. Currently, I'm the director of the Institute for Government Innovation. That's an on-campus consultancy at Texas State. And I'm also an associate professor of practice. The lion's share of my career has been spent as a government employee in state and local government. And one thing, I was the director of the driver license division here in Texas for several years. And I love the idea of thinking about government in terms of business. Even though we were the only place legally to get a driver license to get a driver license, we didn't want to take that for granted. We really wanted to focus on making this transaction as easy as possible for our customers. And I think that's something that we all of us, wherever we're coming from in this idea of smart cities, have to remember that we are serving residents. We have to ask them what they want, what they need, and then focus on trying to do that and not making it just about what's easiest for us as government employees, but what's best for the residents that we're serving.
Well, that's very interesting. Driver's licenses, of course, are a huge source of data, an enormous amount of information, and also concerns about privacy. And privacy and smart cities, that is the permanent public, or one of the permanent public concerns, sufficiently so that it basically detonated the smart city pilot program in Toronto, where the company, an offshoot of Google or of its parent company, really failed to understand how concerned the Canadians were about privacy. And it was a huge issue. In dealing with a lot of personal data in driver's licenses, you must have thought about privacy. The smart city is going to be, to get all this data and to have it function, is going to be set about with sensors. How are we going to keep the individual private?
That is the million-dollar question I think. I cannot claim to have the answer to that, but I think from looking at all of this from a policy implication, it's so important that we consider that. There's just so many implications here. Whose data is it? When I first was starting out, we had purchased some software and I said, I want to analyze that data. And it's like the company told us, you don't even own that data. And it's like, wow, how does that work? And how can we protect something that isn't ours? And, and there's just so many policy implications to look at, and definitely privacy is one of them. And the richness of the analysis and the insights comes from aggregating data from so many different sources, and therefore you increase the size of the target because now not only do you know people's name and address and age and that kind of information, but you know where they shop and what they're buying, and just this huge rich target of data. And so those are things that have to be very, very carefully analyzed and studied and figured out.
Thank you, Rebecca. And we're very lucky today to have no less than 4 cities represented. And that's where the rubber meets the road when it comes to smart cities, where you get the political pressure, you get the pressure from vendors selling their systems into these cities, you get the concerns about supply of electricity, and of course about privacy and other human issues that come into the equation. So let's ask Helen Ramirez from the City of Brownsville, Texas. Helen, how are you looking at the future?
Well, I like what Dr. Butler, when he spoke about disruption, because that's what we're doing in Brownsville. We're being bold and innovative in our thinking. We have a large digital divide in our community where over 60% or about 60% do not have access to the internet. And so what we launched recently, actually we started this initiative pre-COVID, fall of 2019, with the Federal Reserve Bank, Jordana. She really assisted us with looking at a broadband and digital inclusion feasibility plan to really understand what those needs and what do we need to create in Brownsville? Why hasn't the market met the needs of our residents in our community? And how can we proactively assist, be proactive in our actions? We created an alliance with many community partners, the University of Texas RGV, the Brownsville ISD. We have our own utility, the Brownsville Public Utilities Board, the Port of Brownsville, which is the largest publicly owned port in the nation. We also included our economic development partners. So basically and Texas Southmost College, which is our tech college. So this collaborative alliance, I'm very excited. This Thursday, we are launching our survey, and it'll have a test to see what kind of data and what kind of internet service our residents and businesses anticipate and expect, and to identify that gap. So watch out this Thursday, because we are being proactive in our approach. And I'm very excited about this initiative, because we really don't know what to fix if we don't know what the root of the problem is. And I think that's a big part of what we're doing right now.
Helen, what is your role in the City of Brownsville?
I'm the Deputy City Manager. We're a city of 180,000 population. We're the largest city in the Rio Grande Valley, South Texas. And so we have a workforce of 1,400 employees. And that's not including the utilities, the Public Utilities Board. So I supervise engineering and public works, transit, mobility, health and wellness, talking about trails and health and wellness, communications and marketing, and also planning and redevelopment. So my perspective is very global, and we will this next year, we are going to start a smart city roadmap, and we're looking at CMG to be a collaboration with us in that roadmap. And I believe all this data that we collect will be able to feed some of that smart city roadmap, particularly in a city that is experiencing, with the SpaceX South Texas launch site here, just a disruption in thinking and innovation and technology. And we've recently had collaborations with NASA as well. I'm glad to see that they're participating in this summit. And there's just so much more. We're starting new startups here in Brownsville. So I'm very excited about that ecosystem, right? It's not just about one sector, it's really the ecosystem that makes up the smart city.
How is your project to overcome the digital divide going? What are you doing? Are you giving computers to people who don't have them? Are you sending out people to show other people how to operate them?
Well, there's a couple of things. Yeah. That's a very good question. We have just, like I said, launched the survey. It's English and Spanish. We started with an RFQ. Lit Communities was awarded the contract. We had a really healthy, about 10 firms nationwide competed for that, and really is understanding what those needs are, and what is that digital divide that we're experiencing now. From there, their one-on-one surveys and questionnaires and kind of getting out. We almost compare it to the census, because these people, it's difficult to get information to them. So you almost have to do the census way. You're doing door-to-door, boots on the ground, and then you're also launching a survey over the internet. So there's two ways. How we're helping our businesses now, given COVID, is in collaboration with the University of Texas RGV. We've funded with our economic development partners an e-commerce class, new business product and development courses, free. They're courses for businesses, for small businesses. They've had to really disrupt and really think about the way they think and their approach to doing business. So when we talk about those new business models, some of it, like I said, it's physical. How do I encourage outdoor dining, and how can I, with my zoning codes, be more flexible? But a lot of it is technology. What platform do I use to sell my product to make it easy for people to, go to my restaurant or, order online? So that e-commerce component is a big part of what we're doing right now.
Thank you very much, Helen. Now we go to David Jacot of the City of Los Angeles, a sophisticated and complex city as we have on the face of the earth. You're the water and power with, let me not say what the organization is and mischaracterize it. David, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, hello, David. Nice to see you again. Los Angeles is a complex place with a lot of pressures and a lot of needs. What is your role?
Okay, so I am the Director of Efficiency Solutions at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the city-owned utility, largest municipally owned utility in the country. We've got about 1.4 million electric accounts and 650,000 water accounts. I wanted to really touch on the disruption theme that
Please.
John brought up, and a number of ways in which we're seeing disruptions in real time. The first one is the most immediate. About a week and a half ago, we had rotating power outages in the state of California for the first time in almost 21 years due to heat, due to weather. And that's a disruption. And so I think in terms of, we're talking smart cities. Well, smart cities don't start out smart. Every process starts out dumb and it evolves. And what are the things that cause the dumb process to evolve into a smart process? Sometimes something new is thought up and it seems like a good idea and it's smarter than the old one, so it naturally gets uptake. But more often, there's a disruption of some sort. So we look at that disruptor. Rolling outages in the state of California in this day and age is very much a disruptor, and it kicks the top off the anthill, so to speak. There's been a lot of discussion behind this for a long time, but the bottom line is we're trying to shift to a completely renewable grid, and that has reliability impact, as Arun mentioned. We have to have reliability, as you mentioned well. And so we're 6-7 years into a massive uptake of renewables. We see issues. We see that there's this impending nighttime fall off of solar, and there's going to have to be a quick ramp up of traditional generation resources. And if the heat and those generation resources are out of sync, which is what happened on Friday and Saturday of 2 weekends ago, then we get into an undersupply situation. So this is what I would call dumb solar. For decades, we built dumb solar. And we've been realizing and making policy decisions that we need to get smart, we need storage. See, smart solar has storage so that when the sun blips out or doesn't shine for a week, you've got something. So we've known this is not a surprise, but those rolling blackouts, those rotating outages are the disruption that really got the policymakers at the state level regulatory agencies and governor looking at this and saying, hey, we're committed to 100% renewabilization by 2045. It's in state law, but we really got to double down on making all that smart. And that's at the utility scale as well as the individual distributed scale. Homeowners have lots of solar. Most of that's dumb solar. They don't have batteries. So when their contribution in power drops off in the evening, that load all falls back on the utilities. So big push to make the city smarter. We already are the leading solar city in America in terms of distributed energy, distributed solar installed on rooftops. We have the most, 500 megawatts, I believe. But we don't have much storage. And so that is really to make the system smart. And one other thing I'll touch on in terms of smart as well, and I observed this too between the utilities in California, concerns automated metering infrastructure. Smart meters. Smart meters are a way of measuring usage in real time, so you can present energy use information to customers so they can make decisions in real time, help them cut off those peaks a little bit, pull back when they don't need to be using as much energy and we need more on the grid. But there was dumb smart meters initially, in my opinion. And this is what I saw the IOUs install 15 years ago, 14, 15 years ago. Dumb smart meters, barely upgradable.
IOUs, for the benefit of those that are investor-owned utilities.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The investor-owned utilities.
Yeah.
Proprietary platforms, obsolete the day the last one was installed. Very little upgradability. We, Department of Water and Power, sat on the sidelines. We saw this coming. We saw that there would be something better that would come down the road. And sure enough, it is. It's internet protocol. It's open platform. It is directly evolvable over time. And so that's an infrastructure investment now that's worth making, but we were smart about waiting on making it until the platform got smarter than it had been.
How does the smart platform work, David?
Well, they'll be intercommunicating meters, and it'll be a network type communication system, just like the old AMI meters. But where it's different is how it interacts with the Internet of Things, what's coming into the homes today in terms of smart appliances. There was this thought 10, 12 years ago that there was one proprietary platform, Zigbee, that was going to get adopted by all the appliance manufacturers to provide that communications link between the AMI meters at the time and the appliances that were going into homes. To a large degree, that never happened. Now everything, and it's been, the writing's been on the wall for quite some time with the advent of Siri and Alexa and the other home assistants, that it's all internet protocol connectivity. It has to be encrypted for data, and there's a variety of data concerns and privacy concerns that go into it. But that is really what was the missing link in the old business model. The problem is that business model, those meters, that's a 50-year amortized utility investment. Pretty much everything a utility does is a 50-year amortized investment. So what they did was made that long-term investment in a technology that was functionally obsolete within 5 years.
Finally, at least at this go-round, where do you think the storage should be? Is it going to be at the point of use? Are you going to try to put batteries in cities close to where the power is needed, or remotely sited, which increases the vulnerability of transmission?
Yes, yes, and yes. We need utility scale storage at point of generation. So we're building solar farms that have on-site banks of storage, but we need it all the way down the chain. Those come in through the high voltage transmission lines, but we need that. We need local storage at the distribution level, and we need very local storage at the point of use at residential homes. So a house that has solar on the roof should have storage that it can use to basically island off the grid, especially if the power goes down, but also in a demand response high peak situation. We need local circuit relief storage, and this is like maybe a small commercial building or a small plot of land that has a 20 kW or 100 kW battery set on it to back up that circuit, especially when we have increasingly overloaded circuits due to electrification, transportation electrification, and increased loads from climate change. And we need the big out in the boonies utility scale as well.
I have many other questions for you, but I'll come back to you. Thank you very much, David. Dennis Gakunga at Chula Vista, California. Dennis, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Very good, Dennis. a second California city. How are you coping? And I want to ask you in particular, what is the interface between the city management? Tell us, by the way, what you do for the city, but between the city management and the companies that are trying to sell the technology of smart cities, from sensors on light posts to you name it. An awful lot of smart companies in there that would like a piece of the action. How do you interface with them? And do you feel outmanned, or do you have to get big guns in from Los Angeles or New York or somewhere? How does Chula Vista manage?
Well, no, that's a great question. So first of all, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer. So I manage the environmental services team and the conservation group, but I'm also the smart cities lead. So all innovation smart cities related initiatives across the city is under my responsibility. And I was actually specifically brought in to help develop our smart city strategic action plan, or what other folks would refer to as our roadmap. But for some context, since we don't have the luxury of David and his team, when people say LA, a lot of folks don't know where Chula Vista is. So let me just provide just some background information on the city. So Chula Vista is the second largest city in San Diego County. So we're 15 minutes from downtown San Diego, but also 15 minutes from the largest border crossing on the planet. That's San Isidro on the Mexico-US border. So we're a border town. But we're second largest city. We're about 300,000 people. And we also have the largest amount of developable land in San Diego County. We're the fastest growing city in San Diego County. We're the most diverse city in San Diego County. So just kind of gives you some of the unique aspects of our city. So to your question, in terms of how we deal with our vendors, that's a very interesting question, because part of the reason why we developed our Smart City Strategic Action Plan was specifically to allow us to be able to articulate the city's vision, the city's idea, and in terms of priorities with regards to smart cities. So when we knew that we were going down that journey in terms of trying to identify what the city's vision was, in terms of trying to realize where we were heading, the plan is intended to be able to have us be able to sit across the table from the Qualcomms of the world, or whatever utility company or whoever is trying to sell us the latest and the greatest, and have us be able to engage. One, it allows us to demonstrate exactly where we stand with whether it's resource commitments or where we are in terms of our level of prioritization. So in addition, the other thing that we've done is, because we realize that smart cities can only really be successful with engaged stakeholder engagement at a regional level. So we knew that we have to look at smart cities, not just from the Chula Vista lens, not within the vacuum of our city boundaries, but from a regional standpoint. So we banded together with some of our neighboring jurisdictions, the City of San Diego, the Airport Authority, the Port of San Diego, SANDAG, which is our Metropolitan Planning Organization. And we formed this organization which we refer to as a Smart San Diego Region. And it's all about trying to define or identify what are some guiding principles if we were to develop smart cities across the region. And with that, we were able to tap a nonprofit organization that is helping to drive that conversation. And what that does is it removes the political element. We all come to the table with political baggage because our city is under a different political setup than our neighboring city, and so on and so forth. But by having that nonprofit organization lead those conversations, they're a neutral party. They don't have necessarily any hidden agenda. And what that does is it allows us to have a more pure, more conversational and more direct and candid discussion with those solutions providers and those vendors, so that they know that as we're having these conversations, we're able to, address any specific sticking points without necessarily having to deal with the baggage of the politics of each.
Located as you are, Dennis, on the border with a very diverse population, with a lot of complex social needs.
Right.
how do you see smart cities providing tools to help with the social challenge?
So that is an excellent question. So what makes us actually unique is that we identify the unique strengths that our geographic location provides. So let me give you an example. Over 50% of our population speaks more than one language, is multilingual. Over 30% of our demographics has a bachelor's degree or higher. You know, we have a higher median household income than the state, the county, or the US on average. So we've been able to look at those strengths and figure out, okay, how do we take those unique strengths of our community and begin to engage with them when we're talking about our smart cities journey? So our plan is very specific in terms of it's kind of like a bottom-up approach. We started with a huge amount of survey. We engaged our communities in both English and Spanish. And we developed a plan in conjunction with our communities, our businesses, and our residents. And we came up with goals and objectives and initiatives that our community feels that they have a sense of ownership. Because that's the only way that we would be able to essentially get the kind of buy-in that we think is important to have a successful smart city strategic action plan.
That's fascinating. That's very interesting indeed. Going forward, how do you measure a smart city? When I do my research as a journalist, some places look at public transportation, health services, a very human side. Others look at the availability of 5G, which we have not mentioned yet. How do you measure, and what is your goal? When is the city smart? What day is the city wake up and say, boy, we are smart, if there is ever such a time?
Well, let me just say this. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, come on in, John, come on in.
Let me take a crack at it. To me, of course, given my emphasis on new ventures and creating new cities, is that a city can be smart, but not many opportunities around. That is, it can have a lot of technologies. I like a city to be smart when all of a sudden there's an interface between business, that is, new venture development, people coming to the city to provide opportunities. And they come there because of the smartness of the city. They come there because things are connected. It's easier to connect themselves within the context of the city. So you're right. It's not just the electronics of the city. It's not just the mechanisms. It's the impact that it has. So I measure it by saying, okay, how good is all of this smartness for the people who live in the city? That's jobs, that's opportunities, and that's also bringing new jobs to the situation.
Is recreation a part of the mix, John?
I think so. You know, we got to teach people to goof off now. I think that it is a part of the mix, because if you look at the beauty of the city, if you look at what brings people to cities, then recreation is usually built into the smart city, whether it's bicycling, whether it's parks. But again, those things are smart now. That means I could actually work by sitting in the park. It means that I'm connected when I'm sitting at the pool. It means all of those things that allow me to connect to work as well as pleasure.
And if I could just add to that,
Helen, please.
You know, what's unique about Brownsville, and actually we have a city council or commissioner that is a doctor, Dr. Gowan. She's a gynecologist, and she is at a forefront. She won the planning elected official of the year of the American Planning Association. And it's because she is a leader for trails and active living. The Rio Grande Valley approved an active plan of 62 miles of trails. And we have many miles within our city limits. And what's interesting about Brownsville is that we have a very high rate of diabetes. And so we can see a correlation. We're very fortunate to have UT School of Health here in Brownsville. So we are able to bring in the best in terms into helping measure how our trail systems have helped reduce the percentage of diabetes in our population. Now we want to take it a step higher, is how do we count that data? And so right now we're working on, we understand nationwide There's different cities that are measuring that data, right? The use, whether it's those cool, different certain types of bikes that measure use. Are there hotspots and hubs where we see more activity? So those are one of the things in our smart city roadmap that's important for us to measure, because we have a population with high heart disease and diabetes. So that's important to us and important to our community.
That triggers the question about, does the city have a role in advising, at least on diet? Those diseases are often associated with really bad diet.
Well, we're fortunate. I mean, I'll just say one thing. We're fortunate enough, because we're a large population, to have a health and wellness department. It's very rare in a city to have that. If you're under 180 population, you really don't have it. And actually, it's interesting because that was a newer department that came into my supervision in December. I thought, oh, this is fun. This is fun stuff. This is like the trails and it's the wellness. And then COVID hit, and it's like it was all data driven. I mean, we are working hand in hand on measuring where are our hotspots and have creating a whole mapping system that is confidential, and that goes back to your confidentiality with regard to where do we need to be knocking on doors and assisting people with information and data on COVID in our city. And so and when our first responders go to a neighborhood, do they know where they're going into? When they assist a household on emergency response, do they know that house has been, has had contact with positive COVID cases? And so those are the technology and data, and having Dr. McCormick from the UT School of Health has really been a blessing for us. Not only our own Dr. Rodriguez and nurses and doctors that we have, but through Valley Baptist and Valley Regional. We have Tuesday and Thursday calls with our hospitals, and we talk about data. We talk about where should our next focus is. Can we get ahead of the curve? I mean, we were there. And with the reopening, unfortunately, the reopening got ahead of us. And so now we've had to really be more stringent than most cities, but that's the only way we're gonna flatten that curve. And so data's been a big part of how we've helped flatten the curve in the city of Brownsville.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dennis, you wanted to say something?
Yes, so I was going to say, when we started our smart cities efforts, we have a saying whereby everything that we touch and everything that we engage at a deeper level shouldn't really be based on the technology. It always has to start with the need. So even when we engage and interact with solutions providers and vendors, it's not always about what type of technology do they have and where has it been applied before and what city is using this latest and greatest technology. We always start off by saying, is there a need that are we trying to address a specific challenge, a specific issue within our city? And if we can get past that, identifying that need, then we begin to engage. Now, with regards to data, we were very deliberate in our Smart Cities Action Plan that one of their goals is around openness and transparency. And to drill down a little bit in terms of what we've specifically done around that is we established an open data governance team, which I help lead and coordinate. And it's intended to really revolve around or have a focused conversation around data in terms of what type of data does our community, our residents, our businesses, are they interested in with regards to innovation? But also, what type of data are we generating and can we leverage and maximize internally? So there's a public-facing aspect to data and the value that it adds, but there's also the internal-facing piece of it where we're breaking down those silos that folks like to talk about and trying to figure out the best way of leveraging that. So it's been working really well, but the open data governance team, to me has really been hugely instrumental in terms of having a focused conversation and having our GIS manager in the room, having our traffic engineering folks, we even have police PD, because as we speak, they're deploying surveillance cameras, and we have all of these things. So trying to find out what type of data we have in-house, and then that brings us to the original discussion we had around privacy. So now we have this map and this picture of what type of data do we have as a city, and what do we need to make sure that we're paying attention to with regards to making sure that we're compliant and being proactive from a standpoint.
Great, Dennis.
Llewellyn,
Yeah, please.
if I could say, yay, Dennis, thank you for looking at data and trying to, I think one measure of how you measure smart city would have to be like, are we breaking down the silos between all the different departments in the city so that the fire department isn't having water data and the utility is having a separate, totally parallel and overlapping set of water data and that kind of thing. It's like, we simply can't afford that anymore. And so I just think that's one measure that we have to look at. How are we doing about communicating and data sharing within the city and the other government organizations that you're interfacing with, like Helen, is all these other organizations.
Great, Rebecca. David, can you tell us how the utility functions as a data collector itself? Because it's pervasive, it's all over a city. It's not just the electricity. You have people everywhere. You have eyes and ears throughout a city. What is the role of the utility beyond electricity?
Llewellyn, can we hear from Ryan?
Oh, sure.
Hey,
Ryan, I'll put the same question to Ryan. Are you there, Ryan?
yes, I'm here, and I'll leave that question to David because that's more specific to the utility, and David is the expertise as it relates to the utility. I am Ryan Trujillo. I'm the Director of Support Services at the City of Colorado Springs. I oversee our Office of Innovation and our Sustainability Program. So been kind of leading our Smart Cities program since back in 2017. Colorado Springs, it's the second largest city in Colorado, about 500,000 residents. Similar to Helen in Brownsville and David in LA, we have a municipal utility, which I think has become ever more valuable as we look to digitize our community and pursue smart city technologies. And also similar to Dennis, we share an Olympic training center. I think there's only a few in the US, 2 or 3 in the US, and Chula Vista and Colorado Springs are 2 of those areas. So we've actually tried to leverage, not specific to smart cities, but just in terms of leveraging our promotion of Colorado Springs as Olympic City USA with the training center. We just opened an Olympic museum this year. So looking to grow significantly. Last year we were ranked one of the most desirable city in the US per US News and World Report. So we anticipate and have seen significant growth over the past 5 years and expect that growth to continue to even outpace Denver in the next 10 years. So it's a great opportunity as we're looking to redevelop areas in Colorado Springs to leverage that, that capital expenditure, leverage that private and public investment to make our community smarter. I think we've touched on a lot of great points.
Are you putting 5G in Colorado Springs?
We are, yeah. We haven't formally announced that we're a 5G city per se, although there's some telecoms who will say that they are a 5G city across the nation. But yes, over the past year and a half, we have had a lot of interest from telecoms implementing 5G. Mainly Verizon would probably be the most prominent provider here. And it's been disrupting, to say the least, from both our city and utility.
Traffic lights are important in smart cities, not just because they control the traffic, but they also carry a lot of sensors, and they will presumably carry the 5G and other things. Who owns your traffic lights? This gets to be an important, not just traffic lights, but street lights. I was not exact there. Who owns them? And as you put more things on them, more cameras, more sensors, more people measuring devices, etc., 5G, who owns them, and is there conflict?
So the city of Colorado Springs has the municipal utility, and they are an enterprise of the city. So the short answer is the city owns the streetlights. They are owned by utilities, but the utilities is an enterprise of the city. Before starting at the city, I worked in the private sector for about 8 years, really in the energy industry. And it is a conflict in most cases if the city or the municipal utility do not own the streetlights, because the ownership, what you put on them, they're becoming the most debated source of infrastructure in a municipality. So we're fortunate, and it sounds like Helen and David are also fortunate to have a municipal utility, and even private or IOUs also. I think the ones that are cooperative are seeing the value in that. In terms of the disruption, following that theme, I think one of the benefits that we've had in Colorado Springs is honestly being a laggard in some of these areas. We haven't, when LED conversion was bleeding edge, we didn't transition to LEDs initially. And I think that's proven to be a value because similar to, as David mentioned with the AMI evolution, lighting has become extremely valuable, and not only just from the LED conversion and you get the energy savings, but now you can convert to 7-pin fixtures and add a lot of very exciting sensor technology onto those infrastructures. So that's actually one of the pilots that we've implemented late last year and are working hand in hand with our utility to implement is controllable streetlights. So can you dim them in the middle of the night, still provide enough luminosity, but get some further energy savings? And then even just from a health and safety perspective, can you monitor the air quality through various sensors? We're looking at snows, obviously here in Colorado. We're looking at snow depth sensors that we just recently put on streetlights last week. So we're going to have that for a year-long pilot. And again, it goes back to data. What can we do with sensors and IoT to better inform our decisions as a municipality and as a utility by knowing more about our built environment and what's happening in real time. So yes, you've raised a good point. Fortunately, our traffic signals are also owned by the city. And over the past decade, we have I think there's roughly 250 signalized intersections in Colorado Springs. All of those are fiber connected. So fiber is a piece that we touched on in terms of digital divide, but the cities that have made similar investment in their traffic management system and network and laid a lot of fiber or even just open conduit, those are becoming more and more valuable as time goes on. And here in Colorado, specific to Colorado Springs, similar to Dennis and Helen, we did develop a roadmap back in 2018, our Smart City Strategy, and we're now in 2019 and 2020 been in the pilot implementation phase, but the end goal is really scalable deployment that really has a broad impact. And one of the last things I'll mention on this is the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. Helen touched on this. Everyone's touched on the importance of stakeholder engagement. And that is something that we've taken very seriously. Even before we're looking at the solutions and the technology, what does our community want? What does our community need? Where do we see that value?
How do you gauge what the community wants? These are sophisticated questions. I mean, even the question of whether you want a traffic light or a traffic circle can get extremely contentious. How do you go to a city and say, do you want 5G? Do you want automated traffic lights shutting down at night, etc.? How do you gauge that? Does the political process, is it dynamic enough to deal with that?
Yeah, I'm sure my public colleagues on the line could agree, but we can never get enough public engagement in our communities. Sometimes if we just simply ask the question, we won't get the answer that we're looking for. It'll be, hey, that's cool that you're working on smart cities, but the pothole in front of my house hasn't been filled in 2 years. So it is an education as our community as a whole. We try to engage them as much as we can, and we have through our kind of strategy development phase. The next step is really the disruption to the public right-of-way. And that's by implementing these technologies, implementing smart parking, implementing EV charging, implementing autonomous vehicle pilots, anything that we could do to get the conversation more in the forefront. That's really what I think is going to eventually lead to better discussion around smart cities. And I know this leads to one of the questions in the chat here from Matthew, that the regulation really can't keep up with the technology. So what's driving the human concerns? And that's the absolute fact. The technology, it's not a technology issue, it's a human issue. And a lot of it is municipalities, which unfortunately, and I'm using a broad brush, but unfortunately there's lack of trust in government at all levels. And so immediately we're fighting an uphill battle that anything we do, there's, we're in the pockets of a vendor, or, we're not using taxpayer dollars wisely. So that's probably the biggest hurdle that we have. And as Dennis and Rebecca alluded to on the data and open data piece, that's critical on specifically stating what data we're collecting, how it's being used by the city, and how you can even see it, make it available. Hey, there's nothing to hide, remove the curtain, there's nothing to hide. And I think the digital age has forced municipalities to be more transparent and be more competitive. When we're all competing against Amazon in terms of customer service, and you can get a package delivered to you overnight, but it takes you, weeks to get a license or a permit filled or you name the government function. It's forcing us to be more innovative and more competitive in that nature.
Thanks very much. Arun, I'd like to ask you, you have a service territory that spreads over 3 states. What are the states doing that they inform each other or make it more difficult for each other? What do you learn from being in several states, Arun?
Thanks again. So we do operate networks in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York, serving a total of 20 million electric and gas customers combined. So it is quite a big spread from a geographic standpoint. In our service territory, we do have the ability to either own the street lighting assets, or sometimes the municipalities can buy it back from us. So we have a very flexible model. Either model works for us. So what we are learning is the cities are highly interested in going smart. That has been a big customer draw. Sometimes we feel the interest is faster than even the technology sometimes. Where we are, because we are a utility, we can only bring to life projects that are benefit cost analysis positive. So a lot of times we see technology that is not benefit cost positive. So that is something we are very much, and then sometimes the cities want to go ahead of us. And so we end up selling our asset to them because they want to do it before we are ready to do it. And so we are, in essence, bringing only technology that certainly is paying for itself through its lifetime savings. And so sometimes the technology is, the monetary and the business models are not catching up to the potential of the technology. And so we are not able to fully bring the economic value of a technology. Data is a big piece. We took a very early on decision that unless it's a utility driven system, like a lighting or something, if it's got personal data, that's a data that the city would own. We do not want ownership because of data governance responsibility. And so the cities now have the responsibility to monetize the data. So if we don't monetize the data, it's the city's responsibility, and that's where it's taking time because they have to go through the data governance rules with their citizens to enable it. So we are learning quite a bit, but what we have most interestingly learned is the cybersecurity is starting to become way bigger than it's been given the attention for, because these technologies do have a huge cyber profile, endpoint security, network security, application security, cloud security, just keeps on going. And the complexity that goes into cybersecurity, we treat a streetlight fixture exactly the way we would treat a revenue grade meter, and we want the same level of sophistication because we don't want somebody hacking into the system and holding us a host or anything of that nature. So security is becoming a big problem, and we are realizing a lot of small cities are not able to keep up. And sometimes they're calling us back and asking us to repurchase the asset back from us because they don't want the liability. So cybersecurity is something that has become the bigger conversation to us than individual use cases. We are also seeing that the systems are highly fragmented today, single purpose solutions. We are moving towards more multi-purpose shared network solutions, technology stack shared between network. And so that's where we bring a lot of our technical expertises. We want to put one network that supports metering, one network that same network could support lighting. So we have a demonstration project here in Schenectady, New York, the birthplace of GE electricity. And so there we have actually intentionally trying 3 different approaches to smart city applications. So one zone is purely single purpose networks. The second zone is shared network with AMI systems. The third one is running off the low power wide area open protocol networks. And we are comparing, contrasting the benefits and pros and cons of each, trying to see what our future roadmap should look like. So we are very much focused on the technology roadmap to make sure it will work. seamlessly for the next 20 years for 20 applications, not one application. And it's also cost effective out of the box. And so we bring the most value to our customers.
I'd like to ask a question of the whole panel, and whoever feels like answering it, please jump in. And that is, 5 years ago when we talked about smart cities, almost in the same breath, people discussed blockchain. Somebody told me, and I quoted it in an article, that it would be the sinew of the smart city, and yet we don't hear very much about blockchain in that context anymore, or for that matter in the utility context, the way we did a while back. Anybody want to talk about blockchain and its role, and is it an increasing role, or was it oversold, or was it hyped?
Well, let me just say that it just gives us an ability to have an open systems kind of conversation. So that is, in the old days, the idea was that the conversation was not open. So what blockchain does is in those different kind of blocks, and it's called a blockchain because it's sort of set up like that, that Llewellyn, me and you can put some data there and we can have an open conversation with the data as we move forward.
I doubt that you and I will have a good data conversation, but we'll give it a fair try. I'd like to again ask the whole panel, tell you something and seek your comment on it, and that is there's a think tank called Eden Institute, it's actually headquartered in Singapore, but they keep a world index of smart cities. Now, I'm not saying they're right, but their criteria are quite interesting and look fairly objective. But the cities they come up with are, I don't have them in exact order, but this is out of the top 10, Seoul, London, Singapore itself, Boston, and New York City. Now, I wonder whether that is unduly weighted for public transportation, because those are all cities with fairly extensive public transportation. Would anybody have a go at what they think the criterion of a smart city should be? What should be the set of criteria for judging a smart city as being smart or approaching smartness?
Well, as far as I'll take my criteria. Being someone that really looks globally, is it seamless? Is it easy for me to take transportation? Is it easy for me do I have a quality of life? Is it easy for me to arrive at the airport, then, find my hotel, rent or get an Uber, or is my time and efficiency quick? Can I pay, is e-commerce alive? And in speaking with transportation, and you're going back to your question on how do you know you're doing a good job with smart cities, is when not your colleagues tell you how good you're doing, but when someone in conversation in the supermarket, when you least expect it, say, you know what, I used to have to go 5 traffic lights and stop every stop when I used to go to A to Z. And now, Helen, I only had 1 light, or I didn't have any lights for the first time in the history that I've lived in the city. And this happened to me last week when we really started an intelligent transportation system region-wide through the RGV MPOs. We have a regional-wide metropolitan planning organization. And when we talk about this technology, we don't talk about it only as a city within our limits, but as a county, as a region, and as South Texas. So for me, that's it, the seamless transition of information and making it easy for me to shop, live, work, play in my community and be educated.
Anybody else?
I would agree with Ellen. I would agree with Ellen. The thing I would add to that is, I had a colleague who would put it very, very, very simplistically, and he would say, a smart city is a city that if you poke it, it reacts. And I thought it was that was such a profound way of putting it, that whatever you throw at a city that's smart, there will be a reaction based on that stimulus or whatever it is that you throw at it. But I think it's really hard to define what a smart city is, because every environment is different. But for me, a smart city is a city that works for me where I currently am. And if I go down the street, or if I go 2 blocks over, or if I go down to the very edge, if the city is working for that community or that resident or that business where they are, that is the definition of smart. And the last thing actually to me would be anything dealing with technology, because the technology piece is not really at the heart or the core of smart cities. It is just one of the multiple factors, because you can have technology, but if the adoption rate is not necessarily successful, you still have the same challenges and issues. So for us, it's more along the lines of how do you break open these walls that have historically been associated with a local government and meet residents where they are with the help of technology, and then have those feedback loops where folks are actually embracing that technology, and because you build trust and you're being able to accomplish what you've set out to achieve.
Thank you. Very good.
If I may, I'd like to offer one more perspective on this particular topic, because I'm an infrastructure guy. I work for the water power utility. The electronics, the controls are layered on top of physical infrastructure. So oftentimes the physical infrastructure, no matter what the use is less than ideal. And so a smart city is one that uses technology and well thought out integrated strategies to smooth over those infrastructure gaps and make it feel seamless. I'll give you two examples. One of a dumb city. Well, I'm calling my own city dumb. One of a bad application of this and one of a good application of this. Budapest. I've been there a couple times. The airport's very slick. The metro system does not go all the way to the Budapest airport. It goes about 4 miles short. They have a bus shuttle. They have a bus shuttle from the airport to the metro system. It's seamless. Very easy to navigate. There's always buses waiting. They have capacity. They help with the luggage. It's integrated into the fare. Once you get to the metro station, you've already got your ticket. It's the best, making the best of a situation where you have an infrastructure gap. LA has a metro system that's currently stops about 1.5 miles short of LAX and has a bus transfer system, which is absolute chaos, total chaos. You don't know where the buses are coming. You don't know when they're coming. Nothing comes for 20 minutes and then 5 buses come. And then it takes forever to get there, and it's not seamless as far as the fare. It's not a good example. Now we're working on it. There's plans to extend the metro and people mover, and it'll get fixed. My point is that's one element of a smart city that can take a less than ideal infrastructure and still make it feel seamless and easy.
Well, you're on.
So if they would have just extended the metro 1.5 miles, you wouldn't have had to thought of the people mover or the bus transfer or anything. Smart thinking is also the mindset and reflecting upon the decisions that you make, the strategy behind the smartness of what you're implementing. Sorry, I'm from Los Angeles.
No, that's good. Interventions are great. I would like to ask why we have not talked about or how we use smart city technology on very old things like sewers and water supply. And that may be a question for David because his utility is fairly unique and it sells water as well as electricity.
So there's a great example of a recent innovation on that I believe public health departments around the country are looking at now. And it's sampling the contents of the sewers at strategically chosen flow points, looking for COVID antibodies in sewage.
I'm familiar with that, yes.
These sensors, they can actually identify neighborhood hotspots knowing what those feeders were, and then they can say, okay, well, this is a big main and it's got a lot. Let's go up to where the split was and see which one has more and keep tracing it. You know, it's downstream contact tracing, basically. And that's a very unique opportunity within the system. Beyond that, the sewers are ancient. The water pipes are ancient, frankly. We just blew another 30-inch main north of UCLA. This time we didn't flood the campus, but we did that 6 years ago. So, those types of things, we need pressure monitors. We have pressure monitors, but we need strain gauges so we understand where pipes are getting more strain than they can take, things like that. That's a slow process to roll out when you got a network of 5,000 miles of underground pipe that's mostly 80 to 100 years old. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge. But there are opportunities, like I mentioned, with the COVID contact tracing effort.
Ryan, I'd like to ask you, how are you preparing for electric vehicles? Colorado Springs, we think of as being fairly progressive and cutting edge in some ways. Are electric cars part of your plan, and how are you planning to accommodate them?
Yeah, appreciate that question. We were fortunate enough to get a grant from the state of Colorado for an EV readiness plan. So we've dabbled in EVs in terms of some of our city and utilities adopting some electric vehicles. We have some chargers in our parking garages, but really looking forward in terms of when the adoption, I think we're, conservatively at 2 or 3% of EV adoption in our area. So we definitely anticipate that to grow exponentially. And so how can we prepare as a city and utility for the infrastructure piece? So that's one way, is really just sitting down and doing more planning around the infrastructure that can support it. And different business models, will it be free charging? Will there be a revenue stream? Is that revenue stream collected by the utility or a private company? All of these questions that'll hopefully inform policy. So, and ultimately that will lead to more autonomous vehicles. I think that, again, it goes back to, it's not a technology issue, it's a human issue. There are flying autonomous airplanes on the market today that we could buy, but no one wants to get in them. So similar to EVs and AVs, I think that, personally, I go down our highway and there's a lot of autonomous vehicles already. They just happen to have a driver in the front seat, but they're distracted with other things. So really planning for that future, and that's where it's the disruption may not come immediately, but getting all of our internal departments, breaking down those silos, engaging with our stakeholders, whether that's academic partners, our local business community, et cetera, to really come up with a plan as collective as we can to be ready for the future.
It's very interesting. What happens, and anybody can answer this, what happens when things go not according to plan? New York City, for example, thought it really understood traffic flow. It had a good fix on the number of vehicles in Manhattan at critical times. It reduced the number of taxi medallions, or it didn't issue any more to prevent an overpopulation of taxis, particularly in rush hours. And along came Uber and flooded the downtown, absolutely, or Lyft or whatever the ride sharer is, all of them. And it threw all those plans right out the window because a disruptive technology, which had never been thought of as being disruptive, disrupted Manhattan and much of the rest of New York City. How do you plan against those events? Anybody?
Well, I don't know if you can really plan. When I was reading the book, The Rise of the Robots, and they were talking about that we're always going to be newbies at much of this technology and learn from them. That's why my favorite word is a pilot. I always try in a certain neighborhood, a certain block, maybe in the confines of your airport or in and around it. I like that word. I think at least it becomes a test case for what can be before you roll it out. But I think we also, government has to change its mindset. It has to be innovative because we'll be left behind, and so will our community. Our communities will be left behind if we do not change our mindset and innovate, and to the detriment of our residents and our businesses.
Rebecca, you're interested in governments. Are governments getting more dynamic, more agreeable to new ideas, moving faster?
We have 4 examples here on this panel
That's true.
Of governments that are thinking differently, that are operating differently, that are embracing and trying to lead innovation. And I think that that's great. I think, though, that we have to acknowledge that there are still some governments that aren't able or aren't willing, don't have the leadership that these folks here are demonstrating, because it's scary to step out there and say, we're going to do something differently. We're going to do it differently. I was questioned even when I was saying, well, we have to think about our customers. And somebody said, customers? Well, what's that? And it's like, they're the people that we serve. And so there's a lot that's still out there that have to be changed, even though it's heartening to see that we have such wonderful examples that we can look to and follow. And I know these folks have taken time from their busy schedule, and they're willing to share that I could call up any of them, other people, other cities could call them up and say, help me help me learn how to do this. And I think this whole concept of panels and the CEDAR initiative at Texas State is looking at building more partnerships and educating more people so that the workers of the future and the leaders of the future will know what to do and be more familiar with these concepts and not be afraid.
Thank you. Our time is up. You've been an absolutely wonderful panel, and I'd like to ask John, who brought us in, for a few quick words of summing up.
Absolutely, you did a great job. And I saw lots of business models developing from your ideas. I've written them down from how do you connect the different kinds of transportation systems.
You do understand about intellectual property, don't you?
I do understand about intellectual property. I've written them down, but certainly what we had a great discussion on the business model surrounding our smart cities, because as we move around the smart city, we must continue to provide jobs and create new kind of opportunities. I really enjoyed the discussion. I really learned a lot from especially the cities, people working in the cities who have their feet on the ground. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. And thank you very much. Thank everybody very much for joining the panel.
Likewise, thank you all very much. And please be in touch with me if I can be of any help in any direction. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Give a hand to you all. Good job. If you stick around, I'll stop broadcasting in weekend recording in week.